welcome to our meeting. First, I'd like to say welcome. I think we have a few new faces here tonight. So Tubbs at home and enjoy the evening. We're happy to have you with us. I just have a few quick things. Number one, a couple, I don't know if it was about a week ago now, or maybe a little more, I emailed the exhibit applications out. So I have a stack of them that have already come in. If you're hesitating, please just send it because you know you're going to participate. Just send it in so we can get you going. We're going to run things pretty similar to the way we did last year. So in terms of the artwork, you'll be communicating with Bradley. But once he's got the applications, he'll be getting in contact with people and you can work with him to decide what you're going to put into the show this year. Another announcement I have is that for the summer, July and August, we're going to pause the Artist of the Month feature on Facebook because everybody's really busy right now. And so I thought, Holly and I thought, it might be a better idea. So Holly's the one that's been taking care of that. So we talked about it today. We thought it would be better if we promoted everybody who's doing a show this summer so that we can give you guys some extra exposure. So to that end, if you are doing a show, please make sure that you're emailing the guild email and I will pass that on to Holly so that she can get it on Facebook. I don't know if you guys all saw the stuff that she did for Allentown. It was really cool how she put that together. So way to go, Holly. Yeah, it's convenient when we're all at the same show. That works out really well, but we don't want to miss anybody. So make sure that you're emailing the guild with your show information. The less she's got to dig for information, the more you're going to get publicized because the more time she will have to dedicate to actually posting versus trying to track you down. So send her a link to the show, whatever information you have to help her out, make her job easier because Holly's doing shows also. So we're all kind of busy right now. Also, please check your email today. Lisa sent out the email for the field trip and for the summer party, which we need RSVPs for. So yes, ma'am. I didn't email about that, but after we got our presentation back there, and then afterward we have skills. Yeah, and actually we have a lot of new folks here, so you guys don't even know probably that before COVID we used to have snacks at every meeting. So, you know, you're welcome to bring stuff, but the whole idea is to make everybody comfortable so that you feel like you can stay and talk after the meeting. Because part of what we're really about is building those relationships, and you can't do that if everybody jumps up and runs out the door. So we want you guys to enjoy your time here. We're only here once a month, and actually less than that. Next month, we don't have a meeting. And then August is the summer party. So also the summer party is a week after what our normal meeting date would be. Is that right? Okay. The 15th. Okay. So yeah, so just be aware of that. And please, we want you all to come, but we would like you to RSVP, whoever you're bringing and yourself, whatever it is, just make sure Lisa knows so that we can get enough food for everybody. And lastly, I would just ask that you silence your cell phones. Lisa taught me that. So if you could just do that. And I would like to welcome the guy who spends most of his life here anyway, Director of Programming, Mr. Alan Nowicki.
Well, good evening, everyone. Am I live? Excellent, good. It's good to see many of you. Many of you are familiar faces to me, new faces. It's nice to meet you. My name is Alan Nowicki. I am the Director of Programming here on the campus, which means I pretty much take care of everything from cleaning the toilets to cutting the grass to you name it. A little bit about my background. So my background is actually in art and art education. I have degrees in art education, art history, a master's in art education. I've taught for over 25 years at every single grade level from pre-K to college. I still teach some college courses in art history as well. Just because I just love it. But how I came here, I was teaching at a public school and they had some budget problems. So of course, the first thing they cut is the art program. So I found myself out on the streets, which was okay. I ended up getting a job at PBS, and I worked at PBS for 6 years. And the last project I worked on at PBS was a documentary on Elbert Hubbard and the Roycrofters. And I knew absolutely nothing of Elbert Hubbard or the Roycrofters, even though I'm fascinated by Western New York history. And I kind of fell in love with the place. I was kind of working on that documentary for about 2 years while working with the campus. And they asked me to be on a committee. And through this committee, they were developing a new program director position. So I was given the task of writing a job description for this program director, which ironically correlated perfectly with my resume. So I gave them the job description and my resume at the same time, and I've been here for 14 years since. So I figure we'll just let this be kind of an open discussion in many ways. I don't know how much people know. I feel like some of you have heard this presentation before. If you want to know about the history, I will tell you that. If you want to know about what's happening on the campus now, I will tell you that. So if you have questions throughout this, please feel free and just ask. Yes, question.
Maybe fill people in on how classes are taught here and how people are going to take classes, teach classes.
I will get to that at the end. How's that? That'll be my little commercial there at the end. Any other?
Haven't really been super immersed in the campus.
Okay, super. Well, then maybe I'll go through this rather quickly. The Roycroft campus was started by Mr. Roycroft. No, it was not. We get that question all the time. Who's Mr. Roycroft? So the Roycroft campus was started by a man by the name of Elbert Hubbard. He was born in Bloomington, Illinois in 1856. His father was a doctor from Buffalo, and we're not quite sure why he left Buffalo, which was a very booming city at the time with the opening of the Erie Canal, to move out to a very rural Bloomington, but that's what happened. Elbert loved the outdoors. He loved horses. He pretty much thought he was going to be a farmer the rest of his life. At the age of 16, a cousin of his, a man by the name of Justice Weller, I'm sorry I don't have a better picture of Justice, showed up at the Hubbard house and told Elbert of these wonderful adventures of selling soap door to door. Now, at the time, you couldn't buy soap at the store. Most families would try to make enough soap to last them throughout the year. And Justice Weller felt that his cousin had the right charisma to sell soap. I'm not quite sure what kind of charisma you actually need to sell soap, but supposedly he had it. Now, Justice Weller was actually in the soap business with another man by the name of John Larkin. Not only were they business partners, but Justice Weller was married to John Larkin's sister. To confuse things even more, John Larkin ends up marrying Elbert Hubbard's sister. So there's this interconnection between the three families. Unfortunately, one of those marriages does not last. Justice Weller divorces his business partner's sister, which in turn breaks up the soap company. Justice Weller decides he's going to stay out in the Midwest and continue to work the soap business around the Chicago area. John Larkin decides to move to Buffalo. Both of them wanted Elbert Hubbard to join them because he seemed to be really, really good at his job. After talking with the family, he decided he was going to follow his brother-in-law. And at the age of 19, he ends up arriving in Buffalo. A couple pictures of Elbert as a young soap salesman. Look at these pictures, say, oh, I'd buy soap from him. Sure. He seems like a clean-cut kind of guy, huh? Soap joke? Mm-hmm. And even though he only went to school till he was 16, he seemed to be a master at marketing and promotion. Many of the ideas that we have today, he either expanded upon or started himself. So he expanded upon the ideas of coupons. He came up with the idea of a buy one, get one free. He came up with the idea of a premium item, which meant this month, if he bought 10 bars of soap, he could get a silver spoon. Next month, if he bought 10 bars of soap, he could get a silver fork. Well, everybody started buying up all this soap to try to get a full set of silverware. He came up with the idea of a pyramid scheme, but we won't call it that. The idea that if you give me the contact information of 10 of your closest friends, you can buy a product that nobody else can buy. All of these ideas propelled the soap company. And if you don't know about Larkin, Larkin becomes the largest soap company in the world and one of the largest catalog, mail order catalog companies in the country. And for those who don't know, so this is where Larkinville is today, for those who know Food Truck Tuesday. And over here is the administration building for the Larkin Soap Company. That was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. This was the first public commission Frank Lloyd Wright ever received. He'd go on to make a variety of the homes of the executives of the Larkin Soap Company, including Darwin Martin's 2 homes, the Martin House in Great Cliff, as well as William Heath, who was another executive. William Heath just happened to be married to Elbert Hubbard's other sister. So as far as we know, Elbert Hubbard and Frank Lloyd Wright met, and they were in Elbert Hubbard's sister's house that Frank Lloyd Wright built. He met a lovely woman by the name of Bertha Crawford through his sisters. Bertha was a Victorian era woman of the times, but she was very well read. She had a master's degree, which was kind of unheard of for a woman at that time. She spoke multiple languages. She was a painter. She played a variety of musical instruments. Albert was like, well, this is the lady for me. And they get married and start a family. Now they lived just down the street from the Larkin Soap Company. And Albert didn't think that living in the big city was the right place to raise his family. So he decided that he was going to move to some place that he could actually have horses. And what better place but East Aurora? East Aurora was very much a horse town, still is. There were 2 large horse ranches in East Aurora, the Hamlin Farm and the Jewett Farm. The Jewett Farm was actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the largest indoor horse racetrack in the world. So people literally from Europe would come to East Aurora to race, sell, and buy horses. Albert was like, well, this is great. I can have some horses here, hop on the train, take the 15-minute train ride into Buffalo and continue to work. Actually, sometimes he would walk to Buffalo from here. They buy a small little fixer-upper. This would have been located right across the street. This is actually where the rooms of the Roycroft Inn are today. So they tore the house down to make the rooms of the inn. But I love this picture with the, today we would have a picture of our dog in the front of the house. And of course he had his horse in the front yard. So by the mid-1890s, Albert starts having somewhat of midlife crisis. It's like, do I really want to sell soap for the rest of my life? He'd already been working at the soap business for 20 years. He was second in command. What he truly wanted to be was a writer. So he ends up selling all of his shares in the Larkin Soap Company, about $65,000, which would be equivalent to about $2 million today. And he ends up, well, I should say, when he leaves the soap company, he ends up training this man to take over his position. Does anybody know who this is? Anyone? I think I heard it. Darwin Martin, yes. So Darwin Martin ends up taking over Elbert Hubbard's job. And so he goes off to Harvard for a semester, hated college. He decides he's going to leave there and go on to do somewhat of a grand tour of England and Ireland, visiting the birthplaces, the grave sites of many of the famous writers that he inspires to be. And not only is he changing his occupation, but he's changing his whole persona. So he goes from a very distinguished businessman to this bohemian-like artist. Oh, those artists. Growing his hair long, wearing big bow ties, big Stetson hats. And he comes up with an idea for a story. As he's visiting these sites, he's researching on these writers, and he's like, what would it actually be like to go to their house and have dinner with them? And he creates a fictitious story of going to the home of William Shakespeare and having dinner with William Shakespeare. And he sends these back to some people in the States and say, well, what do you think? And they're like, I think this is your in the publishing world. And it is. He starts calling these his little journeys. He will write one little journey every single month for the rest of his life. And each year is around a different theme. First year's themes were writers, but he does musicians, he does artists, he does scientists, he does the great lovers of the world, he does orators, he does, each one is a different, he does famous women. which was kind of unheard of at the time because, you know, women couldn't do anything at the turn of the century. The Famous Women actually was one of his best-selling series for the Little Journeys. It was reprinted 12 or 13 times. So obviously people were interested in that. But one of the last places he stops in England is the Kelmscott Press. And the Kelmscott Press is where William Morris is working. And Morris is considered the father of the arts and crafts movement. Now, the arts and crafts movement is more of a philosophy than it is a specific art style. That philosophy was a rebellion against the Industrial Revolution. Products that have been handmade since the beginning of time were now being made by machines, and in their views, not very well. So Morris believed that to have a beautiful life, everything in your house should be handmade, from your carpets to your wallpaper to your furniture to your dishes to your curtains to everything, which is a wonderful idea. If you are not a crafts person yourself, you know that can be very, very expensive. But that was the idea. And specifically, the books that William Morris was creating. So at that time, most people said, well, books are just words in a page. They're not the beautiful artwork that was found in the old medieval books. And much of the arts and crafts looks back at the medieval times and the guilds, such as you. And they were trying to recreate that. And Elbert said, well, nobody's doing anything like this back in America. I'm going to come back to America and I'm going to set up my own Kelmscott Press. Now, I should say more Buffalo history. The Kelmscott produced 66 different books. There's very few places in the world that have one complete set of Kelmscott books. Buffalo actually has 2 complete sets. The University of Buffalo has a complete set, and the Erie and Buffalo County Public Library got the 2 books that they were missing during COVID. So they now have a complete set as well. So Elbert comes back to East Aurora. He starts working with another man by the name of Harry Tabor, who had a print shop on Main Street. They were working together. After a few months, Tabor started having some financial difficulties and asked Elbert to help him out. He had a nice little nest egg from the Larkin. And Elbert paid off all of his debt and actually bought the printing press from him with the idea that they would continue to work together. And a few months later, they got into a heated disagreement. And Elbert says, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. Harry Tabor leaves, and Elbert now has the print shop all to himself. And here's Tabor. I didn't realize I had a picture of him. So a lot of times you'll see 2 different dates of when the Roycroft started. So we'll talk about these 2 different dates. So after Elbert purchases the print shop from Harry Tabor, he works in that shop for a little while longer until he said, you know, I really need a better print shop. So he designs another print shop in 1897 that looks like this. And I might ask, well, what does this actually look like? Looks like a church. So he had designed the first print shop off of a church in England where Wordsworth was buried. So again, bringing this inspiration back from England. For those who don't know, this is still directly across the street from where we are right now. So this is what is known today as the Craftsmen Lounge. All of this is still there. The only thing that's missing is the cupola up on top, and they took this porch off when they added the peristyle on the front of it, but the rest of the structure is all there. Which then begs the question, well, why isn't this called the Hubbard Campus or the Hubbard Press? Why is it called the Roycroft Press? So many people say that Elbert Hubbard never told the same story twice. There's 2 reasons for that. Is he was always elaborating on his stories because he was very much a romantic, but more importantly, he was the ultimate salesman. So he was always kind of tweaking his stories around to help sell a product. So as far as the name and the logo, I will tell you Elbert Hubbard's story, and then I'll tell you the truth. So the name Roycroft is actually 2 words put together, or royal craft. So the idea that something that is so well made, it is fit for royalty, sometimes called the king's craft. The logo was an old printer's mark. So again, if you think medieval times, somebody who is handwriting, hand painting, hand binding a book, it would take months, if not years, to complete that. Oftentimes a printer would have a mark that they would stamp at the back of the book, kind of like a logo, to tell you that the book is finally done and to kind of tell you who actually made it. So Albert Hubbard said that he had found that in an old book. He decided to put an R in the center of the circle, and that is the logo that he's going to use for the Roycroft. Now, the truth was that when he bought the printing press from Tabor, he bought the name and the logo from Tabor himself, because Tabor had already been using both of them already. So Albert didn't come up with any of this. Don't tell anyone. So where did Tabor get it from? So Tabor got the name Roycroft from one of the fonts that he was using in his print shop. It is a very generic font. It has nothing to do with the arts and crafts fonts that you see all over East Aurora. It was named after two brothers, Samuel and Thomas Roycroft, who were printers in England in the 1600s. And we actually had a couple of years ago, while this was pre-COVID, we actually had some Roycroft family members from England who were descendants actually come to the campus, which was really kind of cool. The logo is a little bit closer to the truth of what Albert Hubbard was saying. It is an old printer's mark, but it actually has a long history through the printing world. The first time I've seen it was the Venetian Renaissance printers used this mark, and they just had a single dot right in the center of the circle. It eventually goes up to Germany. The German paper makers start using it, and to differentiate whose papers were whose, they started putting their initials inside the circle. It eventually goes back down to Italy. The Italian paper makers and printers all start using this. I have seen hundreds of variations of this. Many paper companies, even today, have a variation of this. Sometimes it's upside down. Sometimes it's three circles next to each other. Albert Hubbard figured nobody would know that, and that he discovered it himself, and that's what he was going to go with. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this mark, but do you know the other US company that uses this exact same mark? So there is another US company. The founder of the National Biscuit Company was an avid book collector, found it the exact same way Harry Tabor found it, or Albert Hubbard found it, and decided to start using it. Now the National Biscuit Company becomes Nabisco. Nabisco starts using this mark almost the exact same time that the Roycroft does. They end up going to court. They settle out of court over a handshake and $1 with the idea that Nabisco would never get into the printing and furniture making business, and Albert Hubbard would never get into the cookie and biscuit making business. But for those who don't know, the next time you look at an Oreo cookie, there in the center of the cookie, you'll find the mark. Now, obviously, you are all eating your cookies way too quickly. But the next time you eat one, think of me fondly. We'll just skip over that. So what is Albert doing? So he's doing his little journeys. He's doing monthly periodicals. The main magazine was called The Philistine. This would be the equivalent of modern day blogs or talk radio, really. Whatever he wanted to complain about in society, he would write into the magazine and tweet it out once a month. And it was doing okay. He was making enough money to keep the business going. He had three male printers in the basement, 5 women upstairs, pretty much doing everything else from bookbinding to mailings to everything. And it wasn't until March of 1899 that he needed filler for the magazine. He came up with a short story, didn't even have a title on it, put it in the magazine, sent it out. And as we say today, it went viral. Eventually, he will put a title on it called A Message to Garcia. It will end up selling somewhere between 90 and 120 million copies. It was the 3rd best-selling book at the time, behind only the Bible and the dictionary. It was translated into 37 languages. It was made into 2 movies, one silent and one talkie starring Barbara Stanwyck, and it would make Albert Hubbard famous overnight. He would start traveling around the country on the lecture circuit. The more he spoke, the more he sold Roycroft, and then people started getting really interested. He expanded his print shop 4 different times. He could not keep up. He also started having people come to East Aurora to visit with him, and he didn't have any place to put them. At one time, he had over 40 people staying at his house. His wife was not happy. So he had 2 problems. Both of them are really good problems to have. Business is booming. I can't keep up. I have people coming and visiting me. I have no place to put them. So what he does is he creates a second print shop directly across the parking lot right here, and he turns the first print shop into the inn. And that is why it is an inn to this day. From there, he starts, he needs furniture for his factory. He just had his artisans produce the furniture. As people started coming here to visit, they're like, you know, I really, really like that chair and those tables. Can I purchase it? Well, you don't say that to a salesman. He says, sure, you can have that one. And he immediately throws up a furniture shop and starts mass producing furniture. And he had those magazines to help sell the products. Same thing with metal. He needed doorknobs, hinges, things like that for his factory. He had his artisans make it. Once that they were done, well, now they kind of had the metal skills that they could now get into chandeliers and vases and sconces and candlestick holders and etc. Again, if he knew he could sell it, he did. How much time do I have? Because, you know, I'll just babble on for everything. Some of the buildings, the chapel. So this was the second building built on the campus on the corner of Main Street and South Grove. Does anybody know what the term chapel actually means? So the term chapel actually means a guild hall for printers. So he literally was making a guild hall. So every person that comes to the campus and says, can I go to religious services at your chapel? We say, I'm sorry, you can't, because it never was a chapel in that sense. Ironically, when the campus ends up closing, this ends up becoming a church. So that's, the irony is kind of comical. On the front of the chapel, for those who don't know, because I'm amazed at how many people don't realize this, there is a small sculpture on the front of this, of the chapel on Main Street. And I think I have a close-up view of it. So here it is. Has anybody ever seen that before? I hope some of you have. Does anybody know the inspiration behind that? So the person who created that was a man by the name of Jerome Connor. He was a sculptor. Many of the sculptures that you see around the campus from the original time are probably made by him. He was friends with another man by the name of W.W. Denslow. Denslow was an illustrator, did a lot of the illustrations for the Philistine. His most famous work is the illustrator for the first edition of The Wizard of Oz. No, he is the Cowardly Lion. From The Wizard of Oz. There you go. See, you're so smart, Holly. I had that recorded too. Okay. So it really is interesting hearing all the stories about the artists as well. I mean, you could almost write a book just on the artists themselves, both men, women, it didn't matter. At its peak, the Roycroft had over 500 people working here. Men, women, minorities, ex-cons, people with disabilities, single mothers. He didn't care where they came from. As long as if they worked hard, he paid them all the exact same salary. Imagine that. What a concept. Huh. So the print shop, I should say, so each of these floors had its own function. So the lower level, he had 37 printing presses down there. The middle level was for typesetting. The top level was for bookbinding. He had a piano on all the floors. So he would bring in professional musicians to play for his workers while they worked, or they could have music lessons. He had 4 different bands on the campus. He had a petting zoo. He had a library. He had, yes. Where were they living? So nobody was living on the campus per se. We believe Albert and his second wife was living in the inn. We have a map that has 57 different houses around East Aurora that the Roycrofters either built, lived in, or both. They also had a variety of dormitories that they built too. One for single women or single mothers. So I mean, really anywhere around the campus, and they just walked here then. Some pictures from the printing shop, and again, men and women working together. Rather scandalous at the time. To give you an idea of how scandalous this was and what the townspeople thought of. So if you go to South Grove and Main Street, that hasn't changed very much. But where the little park is, there used to be a boarding house, and that boarding house supposedly had terrible food. But the other three corners are the exact same way that they were. So townspeople would say that if you came to the corner of South Grove and Main, you could get starvation from the boarding house, salvation from the church, and education from the school, and damnation from the Roycrofters. So that, guys, gives you an idea of what the townspeople thought of us. And I keep on saying that should be a t-shirt. We should sell a t-shirt like that. So this is the original first print shop. This is where Albert's house was, and they tore that down to make the rooms of the inn. And that's a story in and of itself. Some pictures. So this was the place to come to at the turn of the century. You pretty much name the famous person, and they probably came here at least once. From politicians to scientists to musicians to athletes to writers to suffragists to civil rights leaders, you name it, and they were coming here. And I love Harry Houdini. They probably met on the vaudeville circuit, that would be my guess. The copper shop, besides from printing, the copper shop was the second biggest seller on the campus. They expanded the copper shop 3 different times. And this is where the register is today. So if you look, these are all the same windows that are there. So this would be kind of the doorway into when you walk in from the main room. Furniture shop looks a little bit different. It lost the 3rd floor in a fire. We are in the powerhouse. I don't know how much you want to know about that. And of course, the well. In 1913, Elbert Hubbard has 6 federal counts placed on him for sending pornography through the mail. Do you want to know this story, or should I just go on?
Yeah.
So we can skip over this part. So our idea of pornography is very, very different from, the turn of the 20th century pornography. So there was 2 things. First of all, they said he was sending lewd jokes through the mail in his magazines. These lewd jokes would be the equivalent of dad jokes today. The one I know is of a businessman by the name of Lunkhead who couldn't remember people's names. So he took a new course in word association, and his new secretary's name was Mary Maryseat, but he kept on calling her Gladys. Mary Seat, glad ass. It's a dad joke. It really is. It's a dad joke. But more importantly, what he got in trouble for is his second wife, Alice, and Albert were very much suffragists. They believed in women's rights. They were pushing a lot of times in their magazines the right for women to vote. But more importantly, in one issue, which I still have never seen a complete issue of this because the pages are always torn out, which just makes me want to see it even more. Supposedly, he had an article in there about women and birth control. And this was considered pornographic. So this is what he got in trouble for. On the first count, he was convicted. The other 5 counts were dropped. He had to pay a $100 fine. But more importantly, he had his travel visa taken away from him, and he can no longer travel, which was a huge hit for him. So 1914, he pretty much stayed close to the campus. By late 1914, he started getting the itch a little bit to travel again. As far as we know, he made his way to DC and had a private meeting with President Wilson asking for a pardon. He gave him the pardon with the idea that he shouldn't be doing, these stories anymore, and he gave him his travel visa back. And with that, here's a copy of the pardon. It's actually at the Hubbard Museum on Oakwood. So him and his wife decided that they were going to travel to Europe one more time. So on May 1st, they board the ship called the Lusitania, and they set sail for England. And of course, on May 7th, the ship is torpedoed by a German sub. It sinks in 18 minutes, and Albert and his wife are killed aboard the Lusitania. So from here, his oldest son, Albert II, who we all call Bert, ends up running the campus. Picture of the memorial service. So there was about 4,000 people living in East Aurora at the time. Over 10,000 people showed up for the funeral. Jerome Connor, who did the face of the lion on the chapel, he had already left the campus at the time, but the Roycrofters asked him to come back to do a statue of Albert for the campus. And this is the statue. This actually sat on the Great Lawn. When the campus ends up closing, statues went over across the street to the middle school. Any questions at all, at least about the history? Yes. Family members, well, depending on how closely knit family members you're talking about, there are some still in the area, but we have family members all over the states. We actually have his great-granddaughter, who is an author who lives in Maine, is actually our author for our book club in September. So she's going to be Zooming in with us with that. But we have family members that come throughout the country.
Do you have any information on his home over here on his personal home?
His personal home, it's a really difficult question to ask. Both myself and for those who know the town historian, Rob Goller, we are constantly getting asked this question, and it's difficult to answer. And the reason for that, so we know he lived across the street. When they tear down his house there, he lived for a short time in what's known as White Hyacinth. That's Ellen Muma's house today. So he lived in there for about 6 months. We know he lived in the inn for a while as well. The problem being is he owned a variety of houses in town in which he would either rent out or let people stay in for a while. We don't know if he actually lived in there. And the other problem is right around this exact time in history, East Aurora ended up changing their street numbers. So even if we go to the town maps and stuff, all the numbers completely changed around at the exact same time that he was living here. So we don't know exactly 100% where he was living.
Really fantastic.
Was that the White Hyacinth house? Okay. Yeah, that's a great house. And they put an addition on it, and even the addition works very well with the original house too. Any other questions? So the campus ends up closing in 1938, mainly due to the Great Depression. All the buildings were sold off to separate entities. The inn was really the only building that was still being used in the function that the Roycrofters were using it for. In 1976, a group of local people started to try to bring the movement back. They started the Roycrofters at Large Association. Kitty Turgeon and Robert Rust owned part, well, it was actually Frank Turgeon to start with, owned the inn. And this is a picture of the inn in the early 1980s. People say that it was about 2 months away. They were just going to tear it down. They were going to bulldoze it over and put a parking lot because, we all need more parking lots. I think I have a couple more pictures. It ends up receiving national landmark status in 1986. So some pictures. So one of the owners of the inn, there were 5 different owners of the inn during the 20th century. One of them went through the walls and tore all the copper piping out, which doesn't help when you're trying to run an inn again. It's the Larkin room. It was in really, really rough shape, which is probably why they were going to tear it down. This is the salon. And the Margaret L. Wendt Foundation came in, spent about $9 million to restore it, reopens in 1995. We've slowly started to buying up the rest of the buildings. So the National Registry actually has 14 different buildings on the National Registry. There are 7 different owners of those 14 buildings. So we try to work as closely as we can with the dysfunctional family that is these 7 owners. We purchased a copper shop in 2005 and let's go back and just see the mess that was. When I first came here, this building was just a pile of rubble. There was a fire in here in 1997 that pretty much destroyed the entire structure. So in 2010, we started to, this was all that was left of the building, so part of the chimney and this wall. We started to reconstruct it in 2010 and reopened in 2012, at least the exterior as close to the original of the structure as we possibly could get. The well, in 2010, we had an archaeology group come in and do a dig around the campus. And if you want to see archaeologists get excited, you tell them that there was a well here once. Because what is a well? It's a place where everybody throws their junk into, and then 100 years later, that junk is now treasure. So they were really, really excited about this. They dug and dug and dug, and they finally found the well, and it was partially underneath the Appian Way. And they dug into it and went down about 6 feet and found out that it was just a blank bottom. It was a completely false well. There was actually a hand pump for water about 10 feet away from the well if you actually did truly want water. So since it was fake, we figured, well, we don't want to dig up the Appian Way. So we just moved it about 10 feet away from where it truly was. And we created a fake well just in as well to go with the fake well. Exactly. Yeah. And then in 2015, the print shop became available to purchase, and we purchased that. And we've been slowly starting to restore that to become a fully functioning 19th century print shop. We actually just got a commission from Buffalo State over the last day or two. Created the museum in there, which we hope to expand in the future. And the campus. So as far as what we do here, for those who don't know, we offer a variety of different tours and classes. I do have some instructors in here. If anybody wants to teach a class, just give me a call. We can set something up. We pretty much arrange it around what you want to do. By no means am I, know what your passion and what you truly want to teach are. I will give you some pointers depending on what I think the cost should be. If we start talking about the class, I know somebody came to me once and was telling me about this class. I'm like, this is like a 3-year-long class, all the things you're trying to do. I'm like, break it up into smaller pieces and sell it as separate classes. But our classes continue to grow. We had over 700 students here last year, which was our highest ever. We had, I think, 73 classes that we ran last year. And we already have more classes this year than we had last year. For those who don't know too, besides for classes, we also have some open sessions that aren't necessarily classes, but we started figure drawing classes on the weekends. So this is not a class, it's just a live model. You come and you just draw on your own. It was so successful in the spring that we started to add more in the summertime. We have 3 Saturdays in the summer, 3 Sundays in the summer. The Saturdays are live clothed models. The Sundays are live semi or nude models. So depending on what you're interested in, I'm also getting a wide range of models as well, both men and women, Caucasian, African American, Native American. Many of the clothed models come in costume. I know we've had a ballerina already. We've had a 19th century Civil War dress. Our Saturday this week, we have a fisherman, which, sure, whatever. You want to learn how to draw a fisherman, sure. So you can either sign up for the session, which is $40. You can sign up for the classes that are $15, or you can do a walk-in and it's $18. So it's kind of just different opportunities. We hope to have open studios in the print shop as well. So any printers here, you just want to use the printing press, you can come in and do that. We're hopefully finishing up our kiln in the press room. So we will have a kiln and a potter's wheel as well. If there's any potters that don't want to, where's Bev? We're taking over. We're taking over this pottery thing. Yes. Sure. Sure. So the Appian Way, so it's named after the Appian Way, which was one of the first roads in Rome. And the Romans built these roads and they said all roads lead to Rome. And Albert Hubbard figured, well, he would be as high and mighty as that. So he built an Appian Way that connected his inn to the rest of his campus. Now, when he did it, it was just a sidewalk, a cement sidewalk. When the campus was starting to be restored, Rolla started doing the memorial bricks in there. And they have since transferred over ownership of the Appian Way to us as of 6 months ago. So we're now the owners of the Appian Way now. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay. Yep. No.
So the campus, or I mean, the chapel.
Chapel, yes.
Is that part of the campus or?
Yes. So it is part of the campus. So for those who don't know, so the Margaret Elwent Foundation owned the inn for 22 years. They just sold it this past year to Douglas Jamal. With that purchase, he also purchased the chapel as well. So he owns both of the structures. The first floor is somewhat restored, and they do ceremonies in there, wedding ceremonies in there, as well as meetings and stuff. The upper floor and lower floor are in a complete mess. But I'm not sure. I've heard rumors of some plans that they have for the building, but I don't know if it's going to happen or not. The corner of, yep. Yes. Yep. I guarantee, well, depending on what you consider the second floor, the main floor. So that is the print shop. That is the print shop. That is not. Oh, yes, that is that elevator. Yes. So technically, that is the first floor. Yes. Yeah. Any other questions? So besides from classes and tours, we have a book club. We have a lecture series. We have a film society. Obviously, the art shows. I was literally printing the maps for the art show while I was talking here. So if anybody here wants their map, I can give that to you before I leave. Oh, super. I have nightmares about it all the time. I wake up screaming, art show.
I was gonna ask Alice, can you just tell us about the ghost?
Which ghost do you want to know about?
Because I mean, Albert Hubbard lived all around East Aurora, but now he's.
No, he does not. He lives at the bottom of the sea.
Oh, no.
No, that's Albert Hubbard. So ghosts. I am not saying that I believe in ghosts. I am just saying that I've had unusual experiences in every single one of the buildings. And I will just leave it there. We get calls all the time. Yes. But as of right now, we haven't necessarily let anybody stay overnight in the tower or anything like that. For those who are interested, and if you're a member of the Roycroft, you can get a sneak preview. So we are just starting, for the first time in August, I am starting a death tour. So this will be all about the Victorian era customs around death and the macabre and how it related to the time period of the Roycroft. And I might include some stories along with that. So if you are a member, you can get a sneak preview in August. If not, you're going to have to pay for it come September, October. But as far as some goes, so I really haven't had an experience in quite a few years now. But there is a little girl that haunts the second floor of the inn. This room, even as we speak. So my office used to be in the copper shop, and there's experiences in the copper shop. And they were moving my office to the powerhouse. And I'm like, great, it's a new building. I'll be fine. And the first week that the building was open, we had one of the morning news crews, and they were filming in this room. And I was standing up by the desk out there, and all of a sudden I hear this loud scream, and the woman reporter goes running up to us, and they're like, "Do you have ghosts in this building?" I'm like, "I didn't think there were any in this one." And there are these, they showed the film, and there's these little white orbs moving around in front of her, and she was all freaked out. I've never seen anything in this building. All I know is the ghosts like to ride the elevator, and they love the women's room in this building. The toilets are always flushing. The faucets are always turning on, even though there's nobody in there. So I'll just leave the, I'll end my stories there with the ghosts. Any other questions? That's such a pretty picture. Well, I hope you enjoyed. I hope I didn't talk too, oh, a good